Robert, Michael, Evelyn. The house sighed around me, settling into the profound quiet that only arrives well after midnight. Outside, the November wind, raw and restless, worried the loose shutter on the guest room window, a rhythmic tapping that seemed to count out the seconds of my insomnia. Sleep felt like a foreign country, its borders closed. Down the hall, Robert, my husband Bob, for what felt like a lifetime and was actually 35 years, breathed the deep, even breaths of untroubled slumber, or so it appeared. He'd come home hours earlier from his Thursday night ritual with Michael. Bourbon, cigars, the low murmur of male voices drifting up from the den, a familiar soundscape to our long marriage. But tonight had felt different. Even before he ascended the stairs, his tread had been heavier, his usual post-Michael buoyancy absent. He'd offered only a mumbled an anomaly. Usually, even after drinks, there was a comfortable warmth, a shared settling into the dark. Tonight, there had been a subtle yet palpable tension radiating from him, a tightly coiled energy I couldn't name, but felt in my bones. Had they argued? Bob and Michael? It was rare, almost unheard of. Their friendship was the bedrock of Bob's life, a constant predating me, predating everything in his adult world. They were brothers in all but blood, their history a dense, shared tapestry I'd only ever glimpsed the edges of. Michael, the charming, slightly unpredictable counterpoint to Bob's steadier nature. Always Michael. A faint sound drifted up from downstairs, a soft scraping, perhaps, followed by a barely audible click. My senses, already on high alert due to Bob's unusual demeanor and my own sleeplessness, sharpened. I held my breath, straining to hear over the wind and the ticking clock on the mantelpiece downstairs. Silence. Had I imagined it? Then, another sound, softer still. The almost imperceptible whisper of the heavy front door opening, then closing with a stealthy. Bob was deeply asleep beside me. I could hear his rhythmic breathing clearly now. It wasn't him. Michael? Why would Michael be creeping out of our house near 1 a.m.? He lived 15 minutes away. He always said his goodbyes, often too loudly, in the den. A chill, colder than the draft seeping under the bedroom door, snaked down my spine. Something was wrong, more than just Bob being tense. This felt clandestine. Slipping out of bed, a thick pile of the bedroom carpet muffling my steps, I pulled on my heavy silk robe, the familiar weight a small comfort against the rising tide of unease. The foyer below was cast in deep shadow, punctuated by the weak, silvery moonlight slanting through the transom window above the door. Empty, silent, yet the air felt disturbed, carrying the faint, lingering scent of Michael's expensive cologne and the cold night air. My gaze swept the familiar space, the grandfather clock ticking solemnly, the runner rug slightly askew, the console table on the dark, polished wood of the console table. Something small lay catching the moonlight, something that hadn't been there when we came up to bed. My hand instinctively tightened on the banister as I descended, each step deliberate, cautious. It was a locket, small, silver, tarnished with age, intricately chased with a pattern of delicate ivy leaves. It felt oddly heavy, resonant with history as I picked it up. It wasn't mine. I'd never seen it before. Tucked just beneath it, almost invisible against the dark wood, lay a folded piece of stationery. My fingers felt stiff, clumsy as I unfolded it. 2 stark words were scrawled in his familiar, confident hand, "Ask Bob." And beneath them, an address, a street name and number in Sherwood Park, an older, tree-lined neighborhood across town we rarely had reason to visit. Ask Bob about this locket, this address. The cryptic delivery felt theatrical, almost menacing. Why hadn't Michael spoken to me directly if he had concerns? Why this artifact, this address? It felt less like a warning and more like the opening move in a game I didn't understand, a game played by rules I didn't know. I sank onto the bottom step, the cold marble biting through the thin silk of my robe. The locket felt strangely potent in my palm, a tangible piece of an unknown puzzle. Who did it belong to? Why this specific object? Hesitantly, my thumb found the tiny, hidden clasp. It sprang open with a faint click. Inside, resting on faded deep blue velvet, were 2 miniature photographs, sepia-tongue capturing faces from a distant past. One was instantly recognizable, despite the passage of decades. Robert. My Bob. Barely more than a boy, maybe 17. His familiar features there, but softer. His eyes wide with a startling vulnerability I'd rarely glimpsed in the men I married. The other photo was of a young woman. Dark hair framed an intense, serious face. Her eyes, large and dark, seemed to hold a challenge, a depth that was both compelling and unsettling. I'd never seen her face before in my life. Who was she? What story connected her to the boyish Bob in the other photograph? And why was Michael, decades later, forcing her ghost into our present with this locket, this address, this silent, loaded command? The implications felt vast, terrifying. This wasn't just about Bob and Michael anymore. This involved her. This involved a past Bob had deliberately, painstakingly kept hidden from me. The careful edifice of our 35-year marriage suddenly felt precarious, threatened by the secrets held within this small, tarnished piece of silver. I clutched it tightly, the engraved ivy digging into my palm, the silence of the house pressing in, filled now with unanswered questions and a chilling premonition of shattering truths. The grandfather clock struck 2, then 3, its chimes echoing through the house like mournful pronouncements. Sleep remained a distant, hostile shore. I lay beside Bob, the space between us a palpable gulf, his steady breathing a counterpoint to the frantic rhythm of my own heart. The locket lay hidden in my jewelry box, but its weight felt imprinted on my mind, heavy with unspoken questions. Ask Bob. But how to begin? What question could possibly encompass the tangled implications of the locket, the unknown woman, the cryptic address, Michael's strange behavior? My mind cycled through possibilities, each more disturbing than the last. A hidden past love, a secret child, financial ruin, something darker. Michael's dramatic gesture suggested stakes higher than mere youthful indiscretion. I replayed scenes from our life together, searching for dissonant notes I might have missed. Bob's occasional bouts of deep introspection, moments when he seemed distant, lost in thoughts he never shared, his fierce, almost protective loyalty to Michael, even when Michael's behavior sometimes seemed reckless. I had always attributed these things to the depth and length of their friendship, a bond I respected, even if I sometimes felt excluded. Now, these memories felt potentially suspect, hints of a shared secret life running parallel to the one I knew. Was Michael's motive truly concern for me, or was it something else? Revenge for some perceived slight from Bob, a desperate cry for attention in the midst of his own messy divorce, or perhaps a misguided attempt to force a reckoning, to lance a boil that had festered between the two friends for decades. The ambiguity of his actions only added to my unease. Unable to bear the suffocating stillness of the bedroom any longer, I slipped out of bed again. Downstairs, the first hints of gray dawn were softening the edges of the night. I wandered into the living room, the locket heavy in the pocket of my robe now. She needed to hold it, to feel its reality. I sat in my usual armchair, turning the cool silver over and over in my fingers, staring at the 2 young faces trapped within. Bob's youthful vulnerability struck me anew. What had happened to that boy to make him bury this part of his past so deeply? And the girl, Evelyn, I mentally named her, needing a placeholder. Her defiant gaze seemed to challenge me across the years. What role had she played? The address Michael provided felt like a dare. Go, see for yourself. The thought of investigating my own husband, of snooping around a stranger's home felt deeply wrong, a violation of the trust I thought we shared. Yet, The alternative, confronting Bob armed only with Michael's cryptic provocation, felt weak, insufficient. What if Bob denied everything? What if he constructed another plausible lie around the locket? I needed something more concrete. Knowledge felt like the only shield I could possibly wield against whatever truth was coming. His decision solidified slowly, reluctantly. As the sky outside turned from gray to pale rose, I would go to the address, not to spy exactly, but to observe, to gather context, to see if the place itself offered any clues before I faced Bob with the locket and Michael's command. It felt like stepping into uncharted territory, a frightening departure from the predictable rhythms of my life, but the need to know, to understand the ground I was actually standing on in my own marriage, outweighed the fear and the distaste. Later that morning, fueled by nervous energy and black coffee, I invented an errand, a specific art supply store I needed to visit, conveniently located in the general direction of Sherwood Park. Bob accepted my explanation easily, perhaps too easily, his gaze sliding away from mine as I kissed him goodbye. Or was I imagining things, seeing suspicion in every flicker of his eyes? The drive across town felt surreal. Each red light seemed to last an eternity, amplifying my anxiety. Sherwood Park was just as I remembered from occasional drives through years ago. Quiet streets, mature trees forming a dense canopy, houses with settled, respectable airs. Finding the specific address, my breath hitched. The bungalow stood nestled between larger homes, unassuming yet immaculately kept. Ivy climbed the brickwork, framing a welcoming front porch. And then I saw them. Filling the deep bay window, catching the morning sun, was a breathtaking display of phalaenopsis orchids, moth orchids, in shades of white, pink, and speckled lavender. Dozens of them. Their delicate, almost alien beauty was startling. Bob's failed attempt at growing just one flashed in my mind. Whoever lived here possessed a patient, skilled hand. I parked half a block away, my hands clammy on the steering wheel. Doubts assailed me. This was crazy, invasive. What right did I have? But Michael's note, the locket in my purse. They pushed me forward. I got out of the car, walking slowly along the sidewalk, trying to appear casual, like someone enjoying a morning stroll. As I drew nearer, the front door opened. My heart leaped into my throat. A woman stepped out, holding a small pair of gardening shears. She looked to be in her early 60s, her dark hair elegantly threaded with silver and swept up from her face. She wore simple slacks and a gardener's apron. There was an air of quiet composure about her. She paused on the porch, examining an ivy tendril near the doorframe, and then she lifted a hand to adjust something around her neck. It was the locket, silver, etched with ivy leaves, catching the sunlight, identical to the one Michael had left. Time seemed to slow. Seeing it there, worn so naturally by this unknown woman, felt like a physical blow. It was real, all of it. The connection wasn't just a ghost in a photograph. It was here, living, breathing, tending orchids, wearing Bob's past around her neck. She must have sensed my presence, my fixed stare. She turned her head. Her dark eyes, the same intense eyes from the youthful photograph, now softened by time but still sharp with intelligence, meeting mine. A polite, questioning look. "Can I help you?" Her voice was calm, musical, with no hint of recognition or alarm. Panic surged through me. Words evaporated. I mumbled something incoherent about looking for a different address, turned abruptly, and walked rapidly back towards my car, acutely aware of her gaze following me until I rounded the corner. My mind was a chaotic world. Evelyn. It had to be her, living here, surrounded by orchids Bob couldn't grow, wearing his history. The implications were staggering. The confrontation with Bob wouldn't just be about a secret anymore. It would be about a whole hidden world. The drive home was a blur. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. Evelyn. The name resonated with the image of the composed woman on the porch, the woman wearing the ivy leaf locket, the woman whose younger self stared out from the tarnished photograph alongside my 17-year-old husband. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity, forming a picture I didn't want to see, a hidden connection, a past so significant it required tangible tokens, identical lockets linking them across decades. And Bob had kept her, and whatever story she represented, completely hidden from me. The house felt suffocating when I returned. The sunlight seemed too bright, the silence too loud. Bob was in the kitchen, wiping down the counters, a picture of domestic normalcy that felt utterly grotesque now. "Carolyn, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Maybe I have." My voice was low, trembling slightly with the effort of control. I dropped my purse onto the island, the contents rattling. I didn't reach for the locket immediately. I wanted him to see my face, see the knowledge in my eyes. "Michael left something for me last night, Bob, after you were asleep." He went utterly still, the dish rag frozen in his hand. His face paled visibly. "Oh? What? What was it?" His voice was strained, barely a whisper. "He left a message, an address, in Sherwood Park." I let the words hang there, watching his reaction. He flinched, his eyes widening in alarm. "And he left this." I reached into my purse, my fingers closing around the cool silver. I pulled out the locket and placed it deliberately on the granite countertop between us. The ivy leaves seemed to mock me. Bob stared at the locket as if it were a coiled snake. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. He looked up at me, sheer panic in his eyes. "Carolyn, listen." "No, Bob, you listen. I went there, to the address Michael gave me. I saw the house. I saw the profusion of moth orchids in the window. And I saw her. I saw Evelyn. I saw the identical locket around her neck." My voice was cold now, stripped bare of warmth, honed to a sharp edge by betrayal. He staggered back, gripping the edge of the counter for support. His breath came in ragged gasps. "You saw her? You spoke to her?" "Oh, God, no." "No, I didn't speak to her, though perhaps I should have. Perhaps she would have been more honest with me than my own husband has been for 35 years. The anger I'd been suppressing surged, hot and fierce. "Who is she, Bob? And don't you dare tell me it's complicated or ancient history. What is your connection to this woman? Why the secret address? Why the identical lockets? And why, after all these years, is Michael blowing it all up now? Please, Carolyn, sit down. Let me—" His voice broke. "Let me try to explain. It's not what you think, isn't it? It looks like you've had a secret life tucked away across town. It looks like you've been lying to me every single day of our marriage. It looks like your best friend is either trying to warn me or destroy you. What else could it possibly be?" He buried his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking. "It was ancient history," he mumbled into his palms, until Michael dragged it back into the light. "Evelyn, she was part of our lives, mine and Michael's, a long, long time ago, before I even knew you existed. We were young, stupidly young and tense. Everything felt world-shatteringly important back then. And what happened? What connects you to her still?" He lifted his head slowly, his face ravaged by guilt and fear. "There was an incident. Something happened, something that changed everything for her, for all of us. And Michael and I, we felt responsible, deeply responsible. We made a promise, a pact, to make sure she was always taken care of, to protect her, and to keep the circumstances quiet." Protect her how? By sending anonymous checks? By wearing matching lockets like members of some secret club? What kind of incident leaves a lifelong scar that requires decades of hidden support and silence? His eyes pleaded with me, begging for an understanding I couldn't begin to offer. It was serious, Carolyn. What happened? It affected her deeply, her ability to function normally. The support, it was necessary. The lockets, they were from her mother from that time. Meaningful then, maybe foolish now. I don't know. The secrecy, he trailed off, shaking his head helplessly. The secrecy was born of fear of the past, fear of judgment, fear of losing everything if the full story ever came out. Including losing me? I asked quietly, the question landing with surgical precision. He met my gaze then, his eyes swimming with unshed tears. Especially losing you. You are my safe harbor, my real life. I couldn't risk that. I couldn't bear the thought of you looking at me with disgust or pity. So I built a wall around it, kept that part of my life completely separate. He gestured helplessly. Until now. Until Michael tore it down. The confession hung in the air, incomplete but devastating. A past trauma, a damaged woman, a secret pact between friends, and decades of meticulously hidden support. My husband, the man I thought I knew better than myself, had been living with this immense secret, this hidden obligation, throughout our entire life together. The floor beneath my feet felt unstable, the walls of our familiar kitchen closing in. The air in the kitchen crackled with the weight of unspoken details. Bob had confessed to the hidden connection, the secret support, the pact with Michael. But the core of it, the nature of the incident involving Evelyn, the event that necessitated decades of secrecy and financial amends, remained shrouded in deliberate vagueness. He clung to that part of the pact even now. 35 years of payments, Bob. I kept my voice level, forcing a calm I didn't feel. Where did the money come from? Don't tell me it didn't impact us. It didn't. I swear it didn't. He sounded desperate to make me believe this part at least. I had some inheritance money when I was young, before we even met, set up a separate investment account way back then. The payments came from the growth on that, mostly. Sometimes I'd add to it from bonuses or side projects I did, consultancy work you knew about, separate bank, separate statements sent to contained. The word grated on me. He spoke of it like a hazardous material spill, something to be managed and isolated, rather than a fundamental truth impacting his life, and therefore ours. This meticulous financial separation wasn't reassuring. It was chilling. It spoke of premeditation, of a long-term calculated strategy for deception. And Michael knew about this arrangement? The account? The payments? Yes, he had to. It was intrinsic to the pact. He knew I was handling the financial responsibility. He trusted me to do it. His part was the silence, same as mine. Until last night, my voice was flat. Why, Bob? After all this time, why would he break that pact so dramatically? What could possibly motivate him to blow up your life and mine like this? Bob shook his head, looking genuinely lost, adrift in the wreckage of his oldest friendship. I honestly don't know what's gotten into him. Since his divorce, he's been different, bitter, drinking more. He's been saying strange things, railing against hypocrisy, talking about needing radical honesty. Last night he was volatile, accused me of living a lie, of being complacent while he was suffering, said maybe Evelyn deserved more than my guilt money, said maybe the truth needed to come out, consequences be damned. He threw his own locket. He had one too from Evelyn's mother, at me. Told me to tell you everything or he would. It felt unhinged, like he wanted to burn everything down, including himself, and maybe me along with it. The image of Michael, usually the charming, slightly roguish friend, acting out of such desperate spite or pain, was deeply unsettling. It painted a picture of a man unraveling, pulling Bob, and now me, into his vortex. But it didn't excuse Bob's own decades of silence. So, You're still protecting the secret of the incident. Even now, even when it's clear that the secrecy itself is what's destroying us. I stared at him, searching his face for any sign of yielding. You admit to the hidden life, the money, the pact, but you won't tell me why. What happened to Evelyn? What role did you and Michael play? His face contorted in anguish. Carolyn, please. Understanding the details, it wouldn't change the fact of the support, the secrecy. It would only cause more pain. It involves medical details, deeply personal things about Evelyn's condition, things I promised decades ago never to reveal. Can't the fact that I felt responsible enough to do this for 35 years, can't that be enough? Enough? My voice dripped with incredulity. No, Bob, it's not nearly enough. How can I possibly understand the magnitude of what you've hidden? How can I even begin to consider trust or forgiveness when you're still curating the truth, when you're still withholding the very reason for this entire charade? You asked me to believe it wasn't romantic, that it was obligation, but you won't tell me the source of that obligation. It leaves room for doubt, for suspicion. Don't you see that? I do, he whispered, finally seeming to grasp the futility of his continued silence on the core issue. I see it now, but I need to think about how, if, I can break that final promise, to Evelyn as much as to the pact. It's not just my secret to tell. A web felt impossibly tangled. Guilt, responsibility, pacts made in youth, fear, financial secrecy, a best friend's breakdown in a woman living quietly with her orchids and her own hidden history. My husband stood at the center of it all, trapped by his own past choices, and I stood beside him, blindsided, furious, heartbroken, trying to navigate the ruins. The truth, even now, felt elusive, parceled out, managed, and the part he still withheld felt like the most crucial piece of all. The stalemate hung heavy in the kitchen air. Bob, having confessed to decades of secret financial support and a pact with Michael, still balked at revealing the original incident involving Evelyn. He clung to that final layer of secrecy, citing promises made long ago, protecting Evelyn's privacy, perhaps protecting himself and Michael from the full weight of responsibility. But for me, that missing piece felt like everything. Without knowing the why, the what felt incomplete, possibly even misrepresented. This isn't sustainable, Bob, I said finally, my voice weary but firm. This half-confession, this continued protection of the pact over the truth within our marriage. I can't live with it. I know. His voice was barely audible. He looked utterly broken. What do you want me to do, Carolyn? First, I need complete transparency about the finances. I need access to that secret account, all the records, from the beginning. I need to see the numbers, understand the scale of it, the duration. No more hidden compartments. He nodded immediately, relief flickering that this, at least, was something tangible he could offer. Of course, anything. I'll give you everything. Account numbers, passwords, statements. Whatever you need, I can get it for you right now. Later, I held up a hand, stopping his anxious movement towards the study. First, I need something else. I need you to leave. Leave? The word seemed to strike him physically. He recoiled, raw panic flaring in his eyes again. Leave the house? Carolyn, no. Please, don't make me do that. Let me stay here. Let me talk to you. Let me try to explain more. Try to fix this. Where would I even go? You can go stay with Michael. My voice was cold, implacable. You two clearly have unfinished business. Your pact is broken. Your friendship is likely in ruins thanks to his actions last night. Go deal with that wreckage. I need space. I need to breathe in my own home without your secrets suffocating me. I need to think clearly without you here reminding me of every lie, every evasion. But Ellie, Carolyn, we need to talk this through. Running away won't help. You're not running away, Bob. I'm asking you to give me the space I need to decide if our running away is the only option left. I held his gaze, unwavering. I need time. Without you here. He stared at me, his face a battleground of conflicting emotions, desperations, hurt, fear, and finally, a dawning bleak understanding. He saw the resolve in my eyes, the line I had drawn. The fight seemed to drain out of him, leaving behind a profound weariness. He opened his mouth, perhaps to plead again, then closed it, swallowing hard. Okay? The word was barely a breath, heavy with defeat. Okay, Carolyn, if that's what you need right now. I'll call Michael. I'll pack a bag. He didn't move immediately, just stood there, looking at me, his eyes filled with a desolation that almost broke through my anger. Almost. Then he turned slowly, like an old man, and walked heavily towards the hallway, towards the stairs, towards the life we had shared that now felt like it belonged to someone else entirely. I listened to his footsteps ascending the stairs, the sound echoing in the suddenly vast silence of the kitchen. Asking him to leave felt momentous, terrifying like cutting a vital anchor line in a storm, but it also felt necessary, the only way to gain the clarity I desperately needed. The truth, or at least part of it, was out, but the path forward remained shrouded in fog. Could I ever truly understand the man I married? Could I forgive the depth of his deception? Could a marriage survive this kind of fundamental breach? I sank onto a kitchen chair, the granite countertop cold beneath my hands, the weight of the unknown future pressing down on me. The only certainty was that the life I woke up to that morning was gone forever. The house settled into a new kind of silence after Bob left. Not the comfortable quiet of shared routine, but an echoing emptiness that amplified every tick of the clock, every sigh of the wind. His absence was a constant presence, a void in the fabric of daily life. Walking past his empty study, seeing his side of the bed untouched, finding only my own mug by the coffee maker each morning, these small details were sharp, daily reminders of the chasm that had opened between us. He had left the bank account information on the kitchen counter before he walked out, his handwriting shaky. Logging in felt like archaeology, excavating the hidden layers of my husband's life. The statement stretched back decades, a meticulous record of his secret stewardship. Consistent monthly transfers, occasional larger deposits corresponding vaguely with times I knew he'd received bonuses or completed side projects. It wasn't, as he'd claimed, insignificant sums when viewed cumulatively over 35 years. It was a substantial commitment, a river of resources diverted silently alongside the mainstream of our life. Seeing it laid bare didn't lessen the emotional betrayal, but it added a layer of cold, hard fact that was somehow grounding. This wasn't just a feeling, it was a documented reality. Days blurred into a week, then two. The initial shock began to recede, replaced by a persistent, weary ache. I tried to maintain routines, gardening, reading, attempting to work on my freelance design projects, but concentration was difficult. My mind kept circling back, replaying the confrontation, analyzing Bob's words, Michael's motives, imagining Evelyn's life. Who was the victim here? Evelyn, trapped by past trauma and reliant on secret support. Bob, chained to a youthful pact and living in fear. Michael, lashing out from his own pain, or me, the unwitting wife living in an illusion. Perhaps we all were, in different ways. I spoke with our son, David, on the phone, carefully constructing a narrative about his father needing some time away for a complex work project requiring intense focus, maybe even travel. David, thankfully busy with his own life in another state, accepted it, though I sensed a hint of confusion in his voice. The effort of lying to him felt physically draining, another bitter consequence of Bob's secret. Bob called every few days. Our conversations were brief, stilted. He asked if I was okay, if I needed anything. He didn't push, didn't plead. He sounded subdued, distant. He confirmed he was staying at Michael's apartment, an arrangement I could only imagine was fraught with its own unbearable tension. He didn't offer any further details about the incident, and I didn't ask, not yet. One crisp afternoon, walking through the park, watching golden leaves drift down from the trees, I realized the anger was shifting, morphing into something more complex. It mingled with a profound sense of loss, not just the potential loss of my marriage, but the loss of the past I thought I knew, the loss of the certainty I had felt in my husband's character. Could love coexist with such deep disappointment? Could intimacy be rebuilt on a foundation that now included acknowledged, deliberate deception? I didn't know, but I knew I couldn't remain suspended in this limbo indefinitely. Avoiding Bob, avoiding a real conversation wasn't a solution. It was just waiting. Waiting for what? For the hurt to magically disappear? For him to somehow prove his trustworthiness from afar? That wasn't going to happen. So when he called that evening, his voice carrying the usual hesitant query about my well-being, I took a deep breath. "Bob," I said, the words feeling momentous, "I think we need to meet. We need to talk face to face." The silence on the other end was brief, then filled with an audible exhale of relief, quickly followed by caution. "Okay, yes, whenever you're ready, Carolyn. Wherever feels comfortable for you." "Tomorrow afternoon, that coffee shop on Elm Street, 3 o'clock?" "Yes, I'll be there." His voice was quiet, subdued. "Thank you." Hanging up, my hand trembled slightly. Dread warred with a strange sense of agency. This meeting wouldn't bring easy answers or immediate resolution. It might only deepen the uncertainty, but it felt like a necessary step out of the paralysis. Facing him, hearing his voice without the buffer of the phone, seeing his eyes. It was the only way to begin gauging whether the chasm between us was bridgeable or if it was simply too wide, too deep, the result of too many years of carefully constructed secrets. The orchid hour was long past. Now began the difficult, uncertain work in the full glare of daylight. The coffee shop on Elm Street was nearly empty in the late afternoon hour. The faint aroma of coffee and pastries mingled with the tension hanging between them, so thick it felt like it could be cut with a knife. Bob sat across from Carolyn, his hands nervously gripping his cup, his gaze darting between her face and the tabletop. He looked older, worn down by the weeks spent away from home, away from their shared life. "So, Bob," Carolyn began, her voice even but with a steely edge acquired during days of solitary reflection. "I'm not here to listen to apologies or justifications about the financial side. I'm here for the truth, the full truth. What was the incident? What exactly happened to Evelyn that required 35 years of secrecy and guardianship?" Bob took a deep breath. The sound seemed fractured. He finally met her eyes, and they held not only guilt, but a deep ingrained fear. It's not that simple, Carolyn. There was no accident in the usual sense, no crash, no attack." He hesitated, choosing his words with agonizing care. "Evelyn, she was incredibly gifted, an artist, brilliant, passionate, seeing the world differently. Michael and I were captivated by her, both of us. It was a complicated time, full of youthful maximalism, rivalry, and mistakes." He paused, his gaze drifting somewhere far away, into the past. There was a breakdown, a very serious one, triggered partly by our behavior, the pressure, our immaturity. We were too young to understand the fragility of her psyche. The doctors insisted on long-term institutionalization, named diagnoses that sounded like a sentence. Her mother was desperate. She begged us to find another way. She gave us these lockets as a symbol of a promise. Her promise that we wouldn't let the system swallow her, that we would create a quiet, safe life for her outside the institution walls. Michael and I, full of guilt and youthful arrogance, decided we could handle it, that we could protect her by providing for her financially, creating a cocoon for her, the separate account, the secrecy. It was all part of the plan, a plan that seemed noble then. He shook his head. Over time, it became a prison, for her and for us. We took away her chance at a different future, at real help perhaps, replaced it with money and silence, and the fear that the truth would come out and destroy everything, especially our life together, Carolyn, made me build that wall. And Michael? Why did he blow it all up now? Bob's face contorted. Shortly before that night, Evelyn contacted me. She had changed. The years of solitude hadn't completely broken her. She started writing. A story. Our story. Said she was tired of being a secret. She gave me part of the manuscript to read. It was powerful and terrifying. I didn't know what to do. Michael found out about it. His own life was falling apart after the divorce, and the thought that the past would return and demand something new, that I might get close to Evelyn again through her writing. It drove him over the edge. He decided to burn it all down, using you as the match. Carolyn listened without interrupting. Each of Bob's words laid an icy layer upon her heart. She saw the whole picture. Evelyn's tragedy, the youthful mistake that grew into a lifelong burden of guilt, Bob's fear, Michael's desperation. She could even, with difficulty, understand the motives that drove them then, 35 years ago. But understanding did not equate to forgiveness, not after so many years of meticulously constructed lies. It wasn't just about the old secret. It was about the man sitting across from her, choosing, every single day of their life together, to hide a huge part of himself, his history, his obligations. He had created a separate life parallel to the one he shared with her. This systemic, decades-long deception had destroyed the very foundation of their marriage trust. She looked Bob straight in the eye. There was no longer anger in her gaze, only a deep, quiet sadness and final clarity. "I hear you, Bob," she said calmly. "I hear about the guilt, the fear, Evelyn's tragedy. It's terrible. But 35 years is a lifetime, our lifetime together. And all that time you lived a double life. You built a wall not just around Evelyn's secret, you built it between us. Every day you chose the lie. Even if it was a lie of omission, you weren't just protecting her, you were protecting yourself from me." She paused, letting the words sink in. "I can understand the fear of losing me back then, at the beginning. But to continue this deception year after year, decade after decade, that says something about you that I can't live with, something I can no longer trust." Bob opened his mouth to object, but Carolyn gently raised her hand. "This isn't about Evelyn, and it's not even about Michael. It's about us, about what's left of us. And I realize there's nothing left. The trust has been shattered to its core, Bob, and I see no way to rebuild it." She slowly rose from the table. "I think this is the end, for real." Bob stared up at her, his face pale, his eyes filled with despair and dawning realization. He understood this wasn't a request for space, not an ultimatum. It was a final decision. Carolyn didn't wait for a response. She turned and walked towards the coffee shop exit without looking back. Each step felt heavy, as if she carried the weight of those 35 years of deceit. But with each step she felt the tension of the past week's release, giving way to a bitter but clean sense of finality. The door closed behind her, leaving Bob alone at the table, amidst the ruins of his secret life and the marriage that had just ended forever. The story had reached its conclusion.